Zephyr's four eyes tracked the holographic display floating before him, each pupil dilating independently as he processed the intelligence reports from the frontier colonies. As senior intelligence analyst for the Galactic Consortium, had seen every kind of species the galaxy had to offer. The proud warrior Kethar with their ceremonial combat rituals. The brilliant Nexari who solved problems through collective consciousness. The ancient Vorthak who moved mountains with their minds over centuries of patient effort. But these reports about humans made no sense. Impossible muttered, his translator converting the clicking sounds of his native Zephyrian into standard galactic. His assistant, a young Nexari named Flux, floated closer on their anti-gravity platform. The data has been verified 17 times. Senior analyst Flux said, their voice harmonizing in the typical Nexari way that indicated certainty. The human colony on Kepler 442b was attacked by a Ravager swarm 3 standard cycles ago. Zephyr's mandibles clicked in frustration. Everyone knew about Ravager swarms, mechanical horrors left behind by some extinct civilization. They consumed everything in their path. When a Ravager swarm appeared, civilized species evacuated immediately. It was the only logical response. Even the mighty Kethtar warriors, who considered retreat a concept for lesser beings, would withdraw to fight another day when Ravagers appeared. And the humans evacuated, of course, Zephyr said, already reaching for the next report. No, senior analyst. They fought. Zephyr's four eyes focused entirely on Flux. They fought? A Ravager swarm? Not just fought, senior analyst, they won. The holographic display shifted, showing video feeds from the battle. Zephyr watched in growing confusion as small human figures darted between massive mechanical monstrosities. The Ravagers towered over the humans like mountains over insects. Their plasma cannons could melt through battleship armor. Their shields could deflect asteroid impacts. But the humans were not fighting like any species Zephyr had ever observed. They moved in small groups, never staying in one place. When a Ravager's massive foot came down to crush them, they would scatter like water, then immediately regroup behind the machine. They carried weapons that seemed pathetically small compared to the towering mechanical giants. Yet somehow these tiny projectile weapons were finding weak spots that consortium engineers had never mapped. Pause the feed, Zephyr commanded. The hologram froze on an image of a human soldier hanging from the underside of a Ravager, placing what appeared to be an explosive device on a critical joint. Flux, analyze this behavior. Cross-reference with all known combat doctrines in our database. The Nexari's harmonious voice turned discordant, indicating confusion. No match found, senior analyst. This tactical approach does not align with any documented military philosophy. The humans appear to be using what our systems classify as suicidal improvisation. Zephyr continued watching. The explosive device detonated, and the massive Ravager stumbled. Immediately, dozens of humans emerged from cover, targeting the now exposed weak point with concentrated fire. The mechanical giant toppled like a falling tree. How many Ravagers were in this swarm? Initial count indicated 47 units, senior analyst. And how many humans defended the colony? Approximately 2,000 civilian colonists, with maybe 300 individuals having any military training. The numbers made no sense. 47 Ravagers should have been capable of leveling a planet's surface. 2,000 humans, mostly civilians, should have been nothing more than a brief delay before the inevitable consumption of their world. Zephyr advanced the recording. He watched humans using agricultural equipment as weapons, turning farming tools into improvised artillery. He saw them collapse their own buildings to create traps, sacrificing infrastructure they had spent years building without apparent hesitation. Most shocking of all, he watched humans deliberately place themselves in mortal danger to save others, throwing themselves into harm's way for people they barely knew. This behavior contradicts all established models of rational self-preservation, Zephyr said, his scientific mind struggling to categorize what he was observing. Flux, bring up the psychological profiles of humanity from our first contact protocols. The display shifted to show the initial assessment reports from when humans had first been encountered by consortium scouts. Zephyr read through the familiar text. Species demonstrates average intelligence quotient, physically unremarkable compared to galactic standard. No significant technological advantages. Peaceful disposition with tendency toward diplomatic solutions. Recommended classification, non-threatening, suitable for standard integration protocols. These reports are clearly incomplete, Zephyr said. Request updated intelligence on human military capabilities from all available sources. As new data flooded his display, Zephyr's confusion only deepened. Humans had been members of the Galactic Consortium for nearly a century. They served on trade vessels, worked as researchers, participated in diplomatic missions. They were known for their curiosity, their tendency to ask questions, and their strange habit of forming emotional attachments to almost any other species they encountered. Nobody had ever seen them fight. Senior Analyst, Flux interrupted. We have received priority communications from 3 additional frontier sectors. All report similar incidents. More Ravager attacks? Negative. Pirate raids on human settlements. In each case, the expected outcome was total capture or elimination of human populations. In each case, the pirates encountered unexpected resistance. New video feeds appeared. Zephyr watched human merchants turn cargo haulers into improvised battleships. He saw human farmers coordinate complex ambush tactics with nothing more than hand signals and facial expressions. Most disturbing of all, he witnessed humans continuing to fight even when seriously injured, displaying a pain tolerance that exceeded documented limits for their species. Bring me everything, Zephyr ordered. Every incident involving humans and hostile contact. Every report that seemed too unusual to believe. For the next 6 hours, Zephyr and Flux compiled data that painted a picture so contradictory to established human profiles that it bordered on the impossible. Humans who had disabled slavers by pretending to surrender, then attacking when the enemy lowered their guard. Human rescue workers who had walked into radiation zones that would kill most species, wearing inadequate protection to save strangers. Human pilots who had used their own ships as weapons, ramming enemy vessels in acts of calculated sacrifice. The pattern is consistent, Flux observed, their harmonic voice now showing signs of genuine confusion. When humans face existential threats, their behavior becomes unpredictable and extremely dangerous. Zephyr stood from his workstation, his legs unfolding to their full height as he paced around the cramped intelligence office. Not unpredictable, he corrected. We simply lack the proper framework to understand their responses. He pulled up a tactical simulation, inputting the data from the Ravager battle. The computer ran through millions of possible scenarios, calculating optimal strategies for defeating the mechanical swarm with limited resources. Every simulation ended in defeat. The computer cannot find a winning strategy for the humans, Zephyr said. Yet they won. This suggests they are operating according to principles our models cannot account for. Perhaps they were simply fortunate? 47 separate incidents cannot be explained by fortune alone. Zephyr's communication array chimed with an incoming priority message. The sender identification made his mandibles click in surprise. Admiral Kessatar of the Kethtar warrior fleet. The holographic image of the massive armored alien appeared before them. Admiral Kessatar was a legend even among the warrior-proud Kethtar, having led successful campaigns against the Void Hunters and the Entropy cults. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of absolute authority. Senior Analyst Zephyr, I trust you have been reviewing the reports regarding human combat behavior. Yes, Admiral. Though I confess the data appears contradictory to all previous assessments of their species. The Admiral's laugh was like grinding metal. Contradictory? No, Analyst. We simply never bothered to truly observe them before. Sir? 3 days ago, my flagship was boarded by entropy cult assassins. 17 of my finest warriors fell before we could organize a counterattack. The cultists had taken the engineering section and were preparing to detonate our reactor core. Admiral Kessatar paused, and for the first time in Zephyr's experience, the legendary warrior seemed uncertain. We had 6 human engineers working on that section of the ship, maintenance technicians, nothing more. When the cultists breached their area, I assumed they would surrender or hide until rescue arrived. What happened, Admiral? They fought. 6 maintenance workers, armed with nothing but tools, held off professional assassins for 3 hours until my warriors could retake the section. But that is not what troubles me, analyst. The Admiral's image leaned forward, his scarred face filling the display. They fought like Kethtar. No, they fought better than Kethtar. They showed no fear of death, no hesitation in the face of superior force. They coordinated without communication, anticipated enemy movements without training, and most disturbing of all, they seemed to become more dangerous as the situation grew more desperate. Zephyr felt a chill run through his exoskeleton. What are you suggesting, Admiral? I am suggesting that we have been sharing our space with a species of warriors who chose to disguise themselves as peaceful merchants and farmers. The question is why? The communication ended, leaving Zephyr alone with his data and his growing realization that everything the Galactic Consortium thought they knew about humanity was fundamentally wrong. As he prepared to compile his preliminary report, one more priority message arrived. This one bore the emergency code that indicated an active threat to Consortium space. The message was brief. Large Ravager fleet detected approaching core worlds. Estimated arrival in 6 standard cycles. All available military forces requested for EVA. The emergency session of the Galactic Consortium Council convened within hours of the Ravager fleet detection. Representatives from 12 major species filled the massive chamber, their various forms of communication creating a symphony of clicks, harmonics, telepathic pulses, and translated speech that somehow merged into organized chaos. Zephyr sat in the analyst section, his preliminary report uploaded to every delegate's personal system. Around him, he could sense the growing panic as the full scope of the threat became clear. Supreme Chancellor Vexhai, an ancient Vorthak whose mental powers had guided the consortium for over 3 centuries, raised her crystalline hand for silence. The chamber immediately quieted, all species recognizing the authority that came with her age and wisdom. The threat assessment is clear, she began, her thoughts flowing directly into every mind present. The approaching Ravager fleet contains over 3,000 units. Our combined military forces number less than 800 ships, and previous engagements suggest a minimum 10-to-1 advantage is necessary to engage Ravagers with any hope of success. Admiral Kessatar stood from the Kethtar delegation section, his massive form dwarfing even the enlarged furniture designed for his species. Supreme Chancellor, the warrior fleet requests permission to engage the enemy regardless of odds. Death in battle is preferable to the shame of retreat. Your courage honors us all, Admiral, the Chancellor replied, but strategic reality cannot be overcome by valor alone. We must consider evacuation of the core worlds. Evacuation of 15 billion beings? The question came from Director Haven of the Nexari Collective, their harmonic voice discordant with disbelief. The logistical requirements alone would require centuries to organize. Zephyr found himself standing before he realized he had made the decision to speak. Supreme Chancellor, if I may present an alternative perspective. The Chancellor's ancient eyes focused on him. Senior Analyst Zephyr, you have reviewed the recent frontier incidents involving human settlements? Yes, Supreme Chancellor, and I believe we may have overlooked a significant military asset. The chamber erupted in various forms of laughter, derision, and disbelief. Councillor Thexvar of the proud Altarian Empire gestured dismissively with one of his forearms. The humans? Those traders and farmers who ask too many questions and cry at fictional stories? The same humans who have successfully defeated Ravager swarms on 7 separate occasions in the past year, Zephyr replied, his voice carrying clearly through the chamber's acoustic systems. The laughter stopped. Supreme Chancellor Vexhi's mental voice touched his mind directly. Present your analysis, Senior Analyst. Zephyr activated the chamber's central holographic display, showing the compiled footage from human Ravager encounters. What you are about to see contradicts every established military doctrine in our databases. I ask that you observe without preconceptions. The first video began playing. Silence filled the chamber as the delegates watched humans use tactics that defied logical explanation. Zephyr provided commentary as the footage progressed. Notice their response to overwhelming force. Rather than retreat or surrender, they adapt. Here, you see human civilians converting farming equipment into artillery pieces. The Ravager shields are designed to deflect energy weapons and explosive projectiles, but these improvised kinetic weapons are finding vulnerabilities our best engineers never identified. The footage shifted to show the underground tunnels the humans had constructed during the battle. They sacrificed their surface infrastructure to create a 3-dimensional battlefield. While the Ravagers expected conventional resistance, the humans attacked from below, above, and within. Admiral Kessatar leaned forward. Show the section where they use the damaged Ravager as a weapon. The display zoomed in on a group of humans who had managed to partially disable a Ravager unit. Instead of finishing the machine off, they had somehow reprogrammed its targeting systems to attack other Ravagers in the swarm. This tactical innovation was accomplished by maintenance technicians with no formal military training, Zephyr explained. They reverse-engineered Ravager technology in real-time under combat conditions, using nothing but basic tools and their understanding of mechanical systems. Councillor Thexvar's forearms crossed skeptically. Impressive, but hardly relevant to our current situation. A few thousand humans against individual swarms is very different from 3,000 Ravagers attacking core worlds. You are correct, Zephyr agreed, which is why I recommend we ask the humans for volunteers. The chamber erupted again, this time in genuine confusion. Director Haven's harmonic voice rose above the others. Ask them to volunteer for what exactly? To teach us how to fight like humans. Supreme Chancellor Vexhi raised her hand for silence. Explain your proposal, Senior Analyst. Zephyr pulled up comparative statistics. Every species in this chamber approaches warfare according to their evolutionary strengths. Kethtar use honor-bound frontal assault tactics. Nexari employ collective strategic planning. Vorthak apply overwhelming mental force. Altarians rely on superior technology and discipline. And humans? Humans appear to fight according to principles we do not understand because they are not derived from any single evolutionary advantage. They are adaptation incarnate. He advanced the display to show tactical breakdowns of human combat behavior. They have no species-wide combat doctrine because they invent new ones constantly. They have no honor-bound restrictions because their only rule appears to be survival of their group. They have no technological limitations because they will use anything available as a weapon. The recording shifted to show a human soldier using a medical scanner as an improvised electromagnetic pulse device against a Ravager's sensors. This individual had never seen Ravager technology before that battle. Yet within minutes of first contact, she identified a vulnerability and exploited it using equipment designed for healing. What are you suggesting? Admiral Kessatar asked. I am suggesting that humans do not fight to win. They fight to survive, and there is a significant difference between those motivations. Zephyr activated a new display showing psychological profiles. Every other species in the consortium fights according to predetermined victory conditions: honor restored, territory secured, Enemies destroyed. Strategic objectives achieved. Humans fight until the threat is eliminated, regardless of cost, casualties, or conventional definitions of victory. That sounds like suicidal fanaticism, Counselor Thexvar observed. No, Admiral Kessatar interrupted, his voice carrying new understanding. It sounds like what warriors speak of in legends. Fighting without hope of reward, without expectation of survival, without any motivation except the protection of others. Supreme Chancellor Vex High's mental voice touched every mind in the chamber. Senior Analyst, are you recommending we place the defense of our core worlds in the hands of a species we have consistently underestimated? I am recommending we ask them to show us how they fight when everything they care about is threatened. The chamber fell silent as delegates processed this proposal. Finally, Director Haven spoke. How do we approach them? Our protocols do not include requests for military instruction from junior member species. We ask them honestly, Zephyr said. Humans appear to respond well to direct communication and mutual respect. Admiral Kessatar stood. I will make the request personally. The humans I have observed deserve the courtesy of warrior speaking to warrior. Supreme Chancellor Vexhigh nodded slowly. Very well. Admiral Kessatar will coordinate with Senior Analyst Zephyr to make formal contact with human leadership. We will request volunteers to assist in developing new defensive strategies. As the delegates began filing out of the chamber, many stopping to review the footage more carefully, Zephyr felt a combination of anticipation and dread. He had spent his career analyzing alien species, understanding their motivations, and predicting their behaviors. But as he watched the videos of humans fighting impossible battles with improvised weapons and unwavering determination, he realized he might have just recommended trusting the survival of galactic civilization to the one species nobody truly understood. The communication to human leadership went out within the hour. The response came back in minutes, not through official diplomatic channels, but through personal messages from human individuals across the galaxy. The messages were variations on a single theme. When do we start? Zephyr stared at the hundreds of volunteer responses flooding his communication array and felt his understanding of reality shift once again. These humans were not just willing to help defend worlds they had never seen, filled with people they had never met. They were eager to do so. Admiral Kessatar's voice interrupted his thoughts. Senior Analyst, I have received an unusual communication from human leadership. Unusual how, Admiral? They are not sending military advisors or tactical specialists. They are sending teachers. Teachers? Human elementary school teachers, construction workers, farmers, and maintenance technicians. Their message states, warriors are made, not born. If you want to fight like humans, we need to show you how to think like humans. Zephyr felt his world view crumble completely as he realized the humans were about to do something no species in galactic history had ever attempted. Teach an entire civilization to wage war not as soldiers, but as people fighting for their survival. The first human ships would arrive in 3 days. The Ravager fleet would reach core worlds in 6. Everything he thought he knew about warfare, about species capabilities, about the fundamental nature of conflict itself, was about to be proven wrong. Cuation support. Zephyr stared at the message, then at the videos of humans fighting impossible odds with improvised weapons and suicidal bravery. The human ships arrived exactly when promised, but nothing about them matched Zephyr's expectations. Instead of sleek military vessels, the small fleet consisted of converted cargo haulers, passenger transports, and even what appeared to be a mobile research station. As the ships docked with Consortium Central Command, Zephyr found himself questioning his recommendation once again. Then the humans began disembarking. The first group off the ships looked like exactly what they claimed to be: teachers, farmers, mechanics, and ordinary citizens. They carried personal bags, data tablets, and equipment that seemed more suited to an educational conference than a military briefing. But as Zephyr watched them move through the docking bay, he noticed something that made his mandibles click with recognition. They moved with the same fluid adaptability he had observed in the combat footage. Not military precision, but something more fundamental. They constantly scanned their environment, noting exits, potential tools, defensive positions, and the people around them. It was not paranoia or training. It was instinct. Admiral Kessatar approached the human delegation with full ceremonial honors, his massive form imposing even by Kethtar standards. The lead human, a middle-aged woman with graying hair and laugh lines around her eyes, stepped forward without hesitation. "Admiral Kessatar? I'm Sarah Chen, high school physics teacher from New Geneva Colony. These are my colleagues." She gestured to the diverse group behind her. "We understand you need help with a tactical problem." The Admiral, accustomed to complex military protocols and formal introductions, seemed momentarily taken aback by her directness. "Teacher Chen, we face an enemy force that outnumbers our fleet nearly 4-1. Our military analysts believe defeat is inevitable." "Well," Sarah said, pulling out a data tablet and stylus, "let's see what we're working with." What followed was the most unusual military briefing in consortium history. Instead of requesting tactical data or fleet compositions, the humans asked about civilian populations, industrial capabilities, available resources, and the psychological profiles of various species. They took notes constantly, asked clarifying questions that seemed tangential to military concerns, and displayed a remarkable ability to synthesize information from completely different fields. "You have 17 billion citizens across the core worlds," observed Tom Rodriguez, a construction foreman from Luna Station. "What percentage have technical education or mechanical experience?" Director Haven consulted their databases. "Approximately 30% have advanced technical training, though this varies significantly by species." "And the rest?" "Service industries, administration, creative pursuits, research specialties that require no hands-on technical skills." "Perfect," said Maria Santos, a small woman who had introduced herself as a farmer from Europa. "We can work with that." Admiral Kessatar's confusion was evident. "I fail to understand how civilian populations with limited technical skills constitute a military asset." Sarah looked up from her tablet with a smile that somehow managed to be both gentle and predatory. "Admiral, what do you think humans were before we developed space travel? Primitive hunter-gatherers? Farmers? Mostly, but also builders, crafters, teachers, healers, traders, and problem-solvers. We weren't warriors in the traditional sense, but we were survivors." She activated her tablet's projector, displaying a simple diagram. "Every human settlement that successfully defended against Ravagers had one thing in common. They stopped thinking like civilians and started thinking like people whose survival depended on their creativity." Tom stepped forward. "Admiral, how many Kethtar does it take to disable a Ravager unit using conventional tactics?" "Under optimal conditions? Perhaps 50 warriors with proper equipment." "How many humans disabled that first Ravager on Kepler 442b? Admiral Kessatar consulted his records. 7. "Right, but those 7 weren't trying to destroy a Ravager. They were trying to solve the problem of, how do we stop this thing from killing our families?" Different question, different answer. Maria activated another display, showing resource maps of the core worlds. "You have fusion reactors, manufacturing facilities, mining operations, transportation networks, and 15 billion intelligent beings who don't want to die. From our perspective, you have everything you need to make the Ravagers very sorry they came here." "Explain," Supreme Chancellor Vexhai requested, her mental voice carrying genuine interest. "Gladly," Sarah said. "But first, we need to change how you think about this conflict. You're approaching it as a military engagement with predetermined rules, victory conditions, and acceptable losses. We need you to start thinking about it as a survival problem where the only rule is that you and your people continue to exist when it's over. For the next 18 hours, the humans conducted what they called adaptive thinking workshops, with representatives from every species. Zephyr participated as both observer and student, watching his fundamental assumptions about warfare dissolve. The humans did not teach tactics. Instead, they taught perspective. "Forget about honor," Sarah told a group of Kethtar officers. "Honor is a luxury for people who expect to survive. Focus on effectiveness. Stop trying to predict optimal outcomes," Tom explained to Nexari strategic planners. "Start preparing for worst-case scenarios and multiple backup plans." "Abandon your technological advantages," Maria advised Altarian engineers. "Assume everything you rely on will be destroyed or compromised, then figure out how to keep fighting with whatever remains." But the most profound change came when the humans began demonstrating their problem-solving approach. They divided the delegates into mixed species groups and presented them with scenarios based on actual Ravager encounters. "Your colony is under attack," Sarah announced to Zephyr's group, which included 2 Kethtar warriors, a Nexari collective node, an Altarian technician, and a Vorthak mental specialist. "You have 300 civilians, basic industrial equipment, and 30 minutes before the first Ravager unit reaches your position. Your only goal is survival. Go." The session that followed challenged everything Zephyr thought he understood about intelligence analysis. The Kethtar warriors immediately began discussing defensive positions and fighting retreats. The Nexari node started calculating resource allocation for maximum efficiency. The Altarian technician focused on available technology solutions. Zephyr found himself thinking like a human. "What if we don't fight them where they expect?" he said suddenly. "What if we make them come to us on our terms?" The humans nodded encouragingly as the group began developing ideas that violated every military doctrine in their respective cultures. They planned to collapse tunnel systems to create underground mazes, use industrial fabricators to create thousands of small autonomous harassment drones, and coordinate with other groups to create overlapping fields of improvised traps and obstacles. "You're thinking like humans now," Maria observed with satisfaction. "You're not trying to win a battle. You're trying to make the enemy solve a problem they're not equipped to handle." As word of the human training methods spread through Consortium Central Command, something unprecedented began happening. Species that had maintained careful diplomatic distance for centuries began working together with immediate trust and cooperation. The humans' approach required constant communication, resource sharing, and willingness to take risks for the benefit of others. "They are not just teaching us tactics," Admiral Kessatar observed to Zephyr during a break between sessions. "They are teaching us to think like pack hunters instead of individual predators." The transformation accelerated when the humans began their practical demonstrations. Using only materials available on the command station, they constructed weapons, tools, and defensive systems that exceeded the performance specifications of many military-grade alternatives. "This plasma cutter is designed for precision manufacturing," Tom explained while modifying the device with spare parts from a food processor and a communication relay. "But with minor adjustments, it becomes a short-range defensive weapon capable of penetrating Ravager armor. The station's atmospheric recycling system can be converted into a massive electromagnetic pulse generator," Sarah added, sketching modifications on her tablet. "It would disable our own systems temporarily, but it would also shut down every Ravager within 50 kilometers. Maria demonstrated how civilian fabrication units could be networked to produce thousands of small kinetic projectiles using nothing more than scrap metal and basic chemical compounds. Individual units are harmless, but deploy them in swarm patterns, and they become essentially unstoppable. By the time the Ravager fleet reached the outer detection perimeter, The core worlds had been transformed. Every civilian had been trained in basic adaptation protocols. Every industrial facility had been converted to produce improvised defensive systems. Every transportation hub had been reorganized to support rapid resource redistribution. Most importantly, every intelligent being in the core worlds had stopped thinking like a member of their individual species and started thinking like a human, someone whose survival depended on creativity, cooperation, and absolute determination. When the first Ravager scouts entered the outer system, they encountered something unprecedented in their mechanical programming. Instead of traditional military resistance or civilian evacuation, they found entire worlds that had transformed themselves into complex, multi-layered survival problems. Zephyr stood in the central command center, watching sensor displays that showed 3,000 Ravager units approaching planets that now bristled with improvised defenses, underground networks, and 15 billion beings who had learned to fight like humans. Supreme Chancellor Vexhi's mental voice touched his mind. "Senior Analyst, your assessment?" Zephyr looked at the tactical displays, then at the humans who had spent 3 days teaching an entire civilization to think differently about survival. "Supreme Chancellor," he said, "I believe we are about to discover what happens when an unstoppable force meets an infinitely adaptable object." The battle for the core worlds was about to begin, but for the first time since the crisis started, Zephyr was not afraid, because he had learned the most important lesson the humans had to teach. When everything you knew was wrong, the only solution was to learn everything all over again. And humans, it turned out, were excellent teachers. For the first time in his career as an intelligence analyst, he wondered if the consortium had been asking the wrong species for help.